Errol Spence Terence Crawford, the best welterweight fight of the past 40 years. What's good, everybody? It's your boy, Cardinal Red Sports. Let's talk about it. Alright, y'all. So, there's a conversation going on right now about the Errol Spence versus Terence Crawford fight and whether this is the best welterweight fight of the past 40 years.
First day I seen that little dude, he came up to me talking. He like, man, I'll whoop your ass. I'm like, little dude, I'll beat your little ass. You better stop playing with me. He like, but for real, man, I want you to come and watch me fight. He's like, man, I'm about to win this whole tournament, man. Man, they can't mess with me, man. I goes over there, and I'm like, I'm in the corner. You know what I mean? Devin was in that tournament too. You know what I mean? And he looked at me, and he was like, gave me that little nod. I was like, God damn, this little dude cold.
Surpassing Maypac, surpassing Oscar De La Hoya, Felix Trinidad, surpassing Oscar De La Hoya, Shane Mosley, surpassing, all of these legendary fights. Manny Pacquiao, Juan Manuel Marquez, their whole, myriad of fights that they had, man. It was so many. I can't even remember how many it was. But people are saying that this fight will be the best welterweight fight, surpassing all of those and all the rest of the past 40 years. And I just wanted to get my 2 cents on whether that is some cap or that is full, factual, actual, real-ish. Alright, so what would this fight have to do to actually be considered the best welterweight fight for the past 40 years? What would have to happen during this fight? And if we get a stalemate, what does that say about Spence versus Crawford? What does that say about both guys' careers? Now, when it comes to what they have to actually do in the ring, to me, for it to surpass a Maypac, for it to surpass, a Leonard, Hagler, all these great fights that you could pull out of your hat and say, man, these were awesome fights, and they deserve their spot in boxing history, welterweight history. Number one, I think there has to be a knockout. Both of these guys need a legitimate knockout. Both of these guys are undefeated. Both of these guys have rarely touched the canvas, if ever touched the canvas. So in this fight, for it to be, one of those legendary balls to the wall, history-making fights, somebody has to go down, and I mean somebody has to go to sleep. They can't just go down and touch the mat. That's not enough. There has to be something that is record-breaking in this fight, which means one of these guys has to score a knockout, and one of these guys has to score a knockout early. It can't just be like, well, they made it all the way to the 12th round. One of them got tired, and the other one knocked him out. No, it has to be a dominant performance. Or we have to see the best boxing match we've ever seen in our lives. Let's say it goes like Gotti Ward, or it goes one of those fights to where it's so back and forth you can't even decide a winner at the end of the fight. I'm talking about one of those classic matchups, and there's so many punches thrown. There, cuts that happen. Somebody's bleeding. Both guys are bleeding. I want to see an all-out war between these two guys. I don't want to see them go in there and try to be, the better version of Mayweather, and especially if both guys try to go in there with that type of fight, it's going to be so boring to watch. There's no way it's going to set history-making numbers or even try to rival Mayweather-Pacquiao. Now, what's funny about all those other fights I mentioned, Gotti Ward and Pacquiao-Mayweather, what that fight did that those other fights didn't do, and those were historical fights, don't get me wrong, that fight did ridiculous pay-per-view numbers. There was so much anticipation for that fight. It sold ridiculously. There was so much hate for Floyd Mayweather at that time, and so much love for Manny Pacquiao at that time, that it sold ridiculously. And I don't think those guys have all the elements. You know, that's the thing that's missing to me when people say that this fight is history making. I think if they would have done it at the right time, you know, they could have set some real records. I think them doing it now, they've caught a lot of people off guard. I think a lot of people are going to tune in. Don't get me wrong. It's going to set some records. It might even break the Ryan Garcia-Gervonta Davis record. But it's not going to touch the Mayweather-Pacquiao record. Now, that doesn't mean it won't be a historical fight. Because like I just said, all those other fights, the Leonard fights, the Hagler fights, the Gotti Ward fights, the Mosley fights, the De La Hoya fights, the Floyd Mayweather fights. You know, all those fights were great fights, but all of them didn't sell well. You know, they all didn't do, you know, 1 million buys on pay-per-view. And I think even in the 80s, there was no pay-per-view. So, you know, those Leonard fights and those Hagler fights, those Ali fights, those were free fights. People got to watch those on television. Now, they did ridiculous numbers when it comes to television ratings because they were free fights. You know, there was no cable and things back then. So, you know, you didn't have to have a certain channel just to watch those fights back then. And nowadays, it's all about the pay-per-view numbers. And I think they're going to do good numbers. I think they're going to do great content sales. But I don't think it's going to pass the Mayweather-Pacquiao. Mayweather-Pacquiao set a new precedent not only for the welterweight division, but for the sport of boxing in general. Oh! And we have to recognize what those two guys accomplished and not diminish it just because we think something's going to do something. And it's a totally different time from when those two guys fought. Everything's different from when those two guys fought. And there's actually more on the line when you think about it. And I think that's why a lot of people feel like it's going to be history making. And it's going to be bigger than the last 40 years of welterweight fights because of the undisputed status that's on the line. But that doesn't mean that it's going to sell well. And that doesn't mean that it's not going to be a classic fight because it doesn't sell well. It just means that these two guys have to do something really special, not just put all those titles on the line. It has to be a special fight to go along with it. Because if the fight is mediocre, once again, fans have waited so long for this that I think it's going to get chewed out worse than the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight did for being lackluster and boring to watch. So, y'all let me know what y'all think about all that down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, fun man, share, subscribe. Holler at me on all social media platforms. That's Facebook, that's Instagram, that's YouTube, that's Twitter. But you're more than likely to get a response on the tubes, so holler at me over there. If you like to collabo, feel free to hit my Gmail. It is flockofcards@gmail.com. We are
If you're from the field, you know I'm fucking with you. If you're from Kentucky, you know I'm fucking with you. You ain't never heard of me, you wanna get familiar. Well, my nigga, let me paint a picture. 12 motherfuckers splitting 3 bedrooms. Dang, my nigga, let me get some leg room. Every single night we watch the 10 o'clock news. Young black man murdered over tennis shoes. Every year we move to a brand new hood. Had to fight a nigga just to make it understood. Bitch, I learned to fight from Wayne and your knuckle. First thing they taught me, nigga, swing if you touch it. Moved out of town when I turned 19. Seen $400 pounds of light green. Moved back home before I turned 20. I guess you could say that was the birth of Louis Keys. It was time to let these niggas know my name. Young Real introduced me to the game. He was rapping too big back in the day. When they had Daddy Yo and Hurricane, they was getting beats from Willie Will and Lil J. Can't forget young sirs, they did they thing. That motivated me to do the same, and I did it. Spit it so clean, they thought I came from a dentist. This is for my niggas with the chain gang sickness. When you make it home, I got some change and some bitches. No hook, but they still play it in the club. 7 grams of the loud, paid about a dub. Cause I know the plug and I know the outlet. Feel snapback I got ain't came out yet. Nigga, please listen to the game that I'm slinging. Tax time come around, I claim like I'm banking. Ain't nothing worse than $1 million bitch that'll fuck for a purse. I need a nurse, I think I'm getting sicker. My nigga Dose came through with 2 bottles of liquor. This is for my nigga Moski and all the other real OG. Do a line, pop a pill, roll some weed. Take a seat and listen to the Book of Keys.